diritto all'inglese. Dear colleagues, dear students, good morning. Welcome to session 1. We had a very nice introduction to this conference, first with the opening session and then with the slot devoted to sports people. And now we move to session 1, papers, actual papers and actual presentations. We have 3 speakers, or rather 4 speakers and 3 presentations for this session. We are supposed to end by 1:15, more or less, which means that basically for each presentation we will have 40 minutes. I would invite speakers to confine themselves to 30 minutes so that we may have 5 to 10 minutes for questions and answers. Fine. First presentation, the title is Harnessing the Power of Football and Language. We have 2 presenters, Bernadette Holmes, who is the campaign director of Speak to the Future, which is a national campaign advancing language capability in the UK. She is also currently involved in advising on curriculum reform for modern languages. And I have a very short bio sketch, and the final few words are, how can I say, perfect, because she says that multilingualism is the new normal. I like that very much. Thank you. And the second speaker for the first presentation is Steve Eden, who's been leader of the Arsenal Double Club Languages program since 2011, a program which basically is to do with motivation to learn languages and inspiration, inspiring children to pursue language learning through the universal language of football. So, who takes the floor?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Steve Eden. I work for Arsenal Football Club. When people see me dressed in the Arsenal Football Club tracksuit, they assume that I'm something to do with the players or the coaching staff or something like this. While I work for the same company, what I do is very, very different to what the public perceive as being Arsenal Football Club. My job is to manage the program Arsenal Double Club, which will explain what that means exactly later on. Just a little bit about my background. I'm an Arsenal fan since I was a little boy. A reluctant language learner in school. I went to an all-boys school in South London where languages was not the coolest subject at all to learn, or want to continue at least. But one thing led to another, and I continued learning German at school, then at university. At university I also picked up Spanish, and now it's my job to motivate kids like I was, who don't see the point of learning a language, and how we can make it interesting and fun for them so that we can create a more varied skill set in the UK in terms of our native people. So I'm going to hand over to Bernadette Holmes, who works with me on the programme, and she'll give a little bit of background about the situation in the UK, and then we'll bring it back round to where Arsenal Double Club fits into that.
Thank you very much, Steve. Buongiorno tutti. I am delighted to be here with you today to share with you a little of the challenges that we face in England in particular, but widely across the UK. As we heard this morning, those of us who had the privilege of hearing the panel speaking, English is the global language. Now, for those of us who start off with the global language, you can imagine that that creates a significant challenge in terms of motivation and relevance for young people who are required to learn other languages. That is a real problem for us at a national level. This is why the Arsenal Double Club, double because it combines language learning with football and football skills, came into being. It was very much harnessing the power of these 2 universal forces. Football is a global game. We are a global society, and we need that global game. and the motivation that comes from football and seeing players using different languages and rising to the challenge not only of winning in whichever league they happen to be, but of speaking to other people and the media in a variety of different languages, although they didn't start out as linguists in universities, is an inspiring example to our young people. Now, this little slide here really exemplifies what this is all about, because we're talking here in this international conference today about sociolinguistic contexts, about the dynamics of language in sporting contexts. And this is what we believe. Arsenal in the Community is about the community around the immediate Emirates Stadium of Islington, Camden and Hackney, the boroughs of London. But it is also a global community. It's trying to inspire young people across the world. And we believe, irrespective, as we say here, of social background, ability, gender or ethnicity, everyone should have the opportunity to learn other languages in addition to English. And of course, everybody has the opportunity to play football. It is very inclusive. We face a society in England which is very culturally diverse, in London in particular. Some people come to London and move across Europe and the world because they seek opportunity, and they do that out of choice. Others come to London and to other parts of Europe not out of choice, so they come through migration. We see our programs as giving opportunities to all of our young people to learn through language and through football. We believe that the team itself is a paradigm of intercultural exchange, unity, transcending borders, creating new affiliations, new loyalties. That inspires our young people, who are in classrooms very often where there may be 30 different first languages. So we believe that our programme is an example of breaking barriers, of raising aspirations, and this combination is the magic ingredient. Just to give you a little bit of background, I've put a question mark here, language-rich UK. There are more than 300 languages spoken in London alone. We think now there are around about 311 different languages. In our primary schools, 1 in 5 children in our state-funded schools has another language in the home. So they go into school, they learn the curriculum through English, they go home and use another language or more than one, and they are also required to learn a new language as the curriculum language. In secondary schools, just to give you the age ranges there, primary for us is 5 to 11, and the secondary range is 11 to 16, and if you stay on to do our advanced levels, 16 to 18. In the secondary schools, 16.6%, so it's rising exponentially year on year. Children who have another language in the home. We think this is a wonderful advantage. We think that. It isn't always perceived to be that within the country. And we know that from 2014, so only 4 years of this, it has been a statutory requirement to introduce a new language from the age of 7. Bilingual children tend to learn very well and acquire other languages very easily, actually. The monolingual English child finds it quite a challenge very often. They don't quite see the relevance. So much so, we'll just look at the Eurostat. We're significantly embarrassed, everybody. Italy does far better than we do, although you don't top the table, but we very much at the bottom of the league. So in Eurostat 2016, we know that 65% of people within the European Union claim to be able to speak at least one other language. You can see figures there of the top of the league, if you like, the Premier League of language learners. Sweden, clearly. We can see Lithuania, we can see Luxembourg, Finland and Malta. Luxembourg in particular, we know, has trilingual people working age adults. But look at where the United Kingdom is, 35%. And do you know, that's probably a little generous. We are very poor at language learning. Recently, I conducted a 3-year longitudinal study on employability, languages and employability, which was funded by the British Academy, and that fed into the government reform on which I worked for language provision in schools. I'm just showing you this slide to see what employers really think about this. Of course, English is an asset, but English alone is thought to be a very great disadvantage to English speakers, a huge advantage to those of other first languages. But look what they say. They believe that pretty much 7 out of 10 of them believe that languages are just as important as science, technology, and mathematics. Broad and balanced individuals are needed in the community. They believe that children who leave school or college without another language, so those English Anglophone children who really resist, as Steve said he did to start with, learning another language, they believe they're at a disadvantage. They certainly believe graduates are at a disadvantage. Now, the final columns on the right of my screen as I look at it, this is a really significant one. And I think this is relevant particularly for your university. Those who come with other languages and learn one of the larger language groups of the European Union, so English or Italian or French or German or Spanish, those who have those other languages, employers believe should retain those languages, really raise the level of those languages to high levels of literacy if they can, high levels of literacy, so they can use them in professional contexts. They think this is a significant advantage. How does this relate to our Arsenal team? Well, we have a team of outstanding elite players who speak a number of different languages. We use them to inspire others. I'll pass now to Steve to show exactly how we do that.
So what do I do with Arsenal? My department is called Arsenal in the Community. It's the only department at the club where it's not about the football, it's not about the commercial side, it's not about anything like that. It's all about how we can be a responsible contributor to the local community, using Arsenal and football as the hook to engage people of all ages and backgrounds. We've been going for over 30 years of having a department at the club dedicated to community work. There are 23 of us full-time employees in this department doing this kind of work. My manager is the one that is not Arsene Wenger in the picture, and that's our facility where all of our community projects are based. So our work is best understood when you split it into 4 categories. The first category is, of course, sport. We run lots of projects in the community about sport. This includes physical education in primary schools, lots of recreational sport for young people who perhaps don't have the opportunity or the access to play football. We do lots of work with schools, and we also do lots of disability sport as well. So clearly, there's no barrier at all to taking part in an Arsenal in the Community programme and to play football. The next category is education, employment and training. This is the area that I specialise in. Our main education programme is the Arsenal Double Club, and this is, like Bernadette said, what links football and learning together. We have lots of subjects: English literacy, mathematics, and in my case, languages. But we have other education programs, such as, if you look at the top right-hand picture, that's one of our young coaches, Laura, who was placed out in Ghana. This is our gap year program. This is for people who are 18 years old and over and want to take a year of volunteering away from education or employment, and they want to give back to the community. They come to Arsenal, they get qualifications in football coaching, they get experience in schools of coaching football in PE sessions, and then when they're ready after a period of training, we send them abroad. That's where the gap year comes into it. They go abroad and they volunteer in local communities around the world using football as the hook. We've got other education programs there. The one that looks like a market stall, bottom right-hand corner, that's our employability program. So local people age 18 to 24 normally We have quite a high rate of unemployment in the area where Arsenal is in London. And so on this program, we teach these unemployed young people employability skills like writing a CV, interviewing techniques. We don't stop there. We train them, we coach them into employment, so they get interviews, and we try and get them, like I said, into employment. So there's another example of Arsenal responding to a local need of unemployment and getting young people into work. Our next category is social inclusion. This is more going out into the local community and putting on football sessions, free to access football sessions for young people, to keep them occupied, to give them something to feel like they belong to feel part of something away from all the other distractions they may be on the streets of London. Bottom right-hand corner, this is another one where language is very, very important. This is our project, Freedom from Torture. Now, we partner with a local charity called Freedom from Torture, and these are refugees that have come to London to escape whatever is happening in their home country. They come to Arsenal in the community once or twice a week to learn English, to play football, to be together with people who are in a similar situation, and football and Arsenal is what brings them together to forget whatever it is they've been going through back home, and they can feel integrated in society in London. And lastly, we do lots of work with health and well-being as well. We do fitness programs for men and women. We do walking football for people, I think it's over the age of 40 or 45, I'm not sure. We have a mental health session for mental health patients, and we have bowls for old age pensioners, you can see in the top left-hand corner there. So a very, very wide range of work that we do at Arsenal in the community. There are about 40 projects in total. That's just a very quick introduction to some of them. But let me now focus on Arsenal Double Club, the languages Arsenal Double Club program, because this is firstly the program that I manage and the one that we're going to present to you about today. So, Arsenal Double Club, like I said, thinking back to the 11 or 12-year-old Steve in school being forced to learn German and French and not enjoying it, being asked where the post office is and turn left and turn right and all the things that are going to really motivate a teenager to learn a language. What we try and do is make that as fun and as interesting as possible so that their motivation increases, so that they have the chance to perhaps continue learning a language in the future. The program started at a time when the English government made languages not compulsory for GCSE level. That's 14 to 16 years of age. So what we saw was a huge drop in numbers of students at that age learning French, German, Spanish, and so on. So this is where, again, we've responded to a need. Normally we respond to local need, but frankly, this is a national need that we're trying to respond to here. So we create Arsenal materials in the classroom, like workbooks, all linked to Arsenal and football, that matches more or less what they learn in school anyway. So instead of describing a cartoon character in the book, brown hair, blue eyes, tall, this sort of thing, we're describing football players now. And that simple change makes a huge difference to the motivation, especially of those that, like me, were not interested in learning a language at that age. We then reward them, the Double Club. The name comes in with the football, the second part of it, where they go out onto the playground or onto the football field, and they do a practical football or physical education session where the language is included as well. So if they've practiced their numbers in the classroom, they can then go outside, play football, but there'll be activities they can do where they practice their numbers in the language while they're kicking a football around the pitch. So it's all very motivational. We have a very diverse squad of players in the men's and the women's team at Arsenal, so that gives them role models, not just from a sporting context, but also from a linguistic context as well. If you believe in stereotypes, then you might think that footballers are not very intelligent. But as you'll see in the Arsenal squad, you'll see lots and lots of players who are not just bilingual, but they'll speak lots of different languages. And okay, they might not be able to recite literature or things like that in the language that they've learned, but they can absolutely communicate in the language, connect with the culture and the ideas and the behaviors and so on. So we're giving them role models on two levels there. And we also give them the opportunity, as you can see at the bottom there, to come to Emirates Stadium, which I'll come on to later on. So what does the program look like? We have materials for beginners. So again, like I said, describing yourself, colours, numbers, body parts, all the stuff that you learn in school, but linking it to Arsenal. Here's an example. There's the booklet that you get for learning French. And inside, you can see the first activity where All they're doing there is introducing yourself, saying where you come from, which country, and on the right, to make it fun and interesting for them, it's football positions. Now, there are two ways you can interpret this. It's either you're learning goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, striker, or you're teaching them how to say I am. Because that's something you have to learn in language anyway. But if you say I am tall, I am a boy, I am whatever, interest levels are maybe about here. If you're telling the children to say I'm a goalkeeper, I'm a striker, interest levels come up here. Okay, so I do, believe it or not, I do get teachers that say, but why do they need to learn the word for midfielder? They're not seeing the point, they're missing it completely. We're disguising the learning, making it relevant to the interest and the motivation of the young people, doing it through football. By the way, as an Arsenal fan, I know that I've been doing this job for far too long when I see Olivier Giroud in the picture thinking, oh, he's left, I need to update the books, not we need a new striker. That's the first thing I think of now is what I need to do with my materials. There's an example of the Spanish booklets. They're all the same in different languages. I've just put a selection for you to see. There's the colours on the left and countries and nationalities on the right. Again, very visual, very motivating, very different to certainly education in the UK when I was growing up. We provide guidance to the teachers. I don't expect you to read that in full. What I'm trying to show you there is that it's not just a case of filling in those activities and closing the book afterwards. These guidance notes, these teachers' notes for the teachers, they encourage them to extend the activity. So they're telling the teacher to ask the pupils, what does soy de España and soy de Inglaterra mean? And that's going to generate a discussion about where players come from, the different nationalities, what languages they might speak. Then the activity in the middle says, pupils should come up with 3 reasons for why football players would need to speak different languages and feed back to the class. So we're coming away from vocabulary now. We're coming on to the point, the reasons to learn a language. And that was never really communicated to me as a child as to why I should continue learning a language. So this is another dimension to the program that we're trying to give to our schools. This is another activity in the teacher's notes. I don't know if you can make out on the screen, but there's the words with numbers PowerPoint in blue there. That refers to something that's online. So we've got not just the booklets, not just the coaching activities and the teacher's notes, but there's some online stuff as well that they can use to support their learning. That's an example of the coaching, the practical session. So the teachers will receive a booklet on the left is an example, where you can see the topic in the green box is numbers. And there's the organisation, the instructions there, and on the right you've got the different words you can use to incorporate into the practical session that will help the children to practice their numbers in whatever language they're learning, all through football. And the picture is our Spanish defender, Hector Bellerin, in a local school, and if you look carefully in the background, you can see just how exciting learning numbers can be when you take it out onto the football pitch. The next level up is our intermediate level resources. So not just learning numbers and colours and the basics now, we're trying to increase the level. And this is suitable for all learners from, intermediate is very broad. We consider this from upper primary, so 10, 11 years old, all the way up to A level, which is approaching 18 years old. There are some materials here that are suitable for all those sorts of learners. We don't do it in the form of a booklet like we did for the beginners, but what we do have is free, importantly, free to access for our schools online digital resources, and that includes some of the things I'm going to show you now. So that's the website, and I've blown up the list of activities on the left so you can see. For German, there's again all the same in the different languages. The beginner's downloads are what I mentioned a minute ago for the beginner's booklets, but everything underneath that, the authentic text, the personal descriptions, the football vocabulary, all of that is for the intermediate level. There's an example of an authentic text for our French learners. This is a newspaper article taken from a French publication where it's announcing the arrival of our new manager in the news. So again, it's reading, you can do translation with that, you can analyse grammar with that, you can do all sorts of things with that. All we're doing is we're providing teachers with a tool kit to make languages interesting and motivating for the students. This is the next step up from the first page I showed you earlier for the beginners, where it's my name is and what country you come from. This, you can obviously see there's a lot more there You've got your age, your nationality, who you play for, and then there's some extended writing for them to do, not just filling in speech bubbles now, some extended writing that they have to do. We've introduced more verbs, the third person on the second page there. So again, a very, very familiar feel to what you learn anyway in school, but linking it to Arsenal is what's going to make the kids want to do it. That's the key here. These are some of my favourite activities to show, and I hope the video is going to do it justice as well. These are some riddles, some puzzles that we have in the different languages, and these are good to get the children warmed up and prepared at the start of the lesson. They get a sheet that looks like that, with the riddle at the top, and underneath is just some empty space where they can look up vocabulary and try to work out the answer to the riddle. We also have our players speaking into camera, telling them the riddle so they can listen to it as well. I'm going to try and play it now. It's in French. It's our defender, Laurent Koscielny, and let's see if this will play. And you can try and work out the riddle as well.
Oh, no sound.
There's no sound, but you can see the text. What he's saying is, without saying Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, can you name 3 consecutive days? And there's your answer: yesterday, today, tomorrow. So it's a brain exercise for the children, and doing it through the language. It's fun, it's exciting, but really, what are they going to be doing? They're not just solving a puzzle. They're dissecting the language, they're revising their days of the week, they're looking at grammatical structures there, how to ask a question, these sorts of things. Another activity, I won't show the video, but this is, again, Laurent Koscielny describing his dream team, his 5 favourite players, goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, and so on. And at the bottom, you can see there's some links to click on. There's a worksheet for the children to fill in the names that he's saying and the reasons that he gives. They can do their own dream team, and of course there's a transcript as well so they can follow what he's saying. So those are the intermediate resources. This is a very new one, this next one. This is ambassadors, and this is aimed at even older than that, so 14 and above. I said earlier that it was never really truly communicated to me why you would learn a language when apparently everybody speaks English, which is also a myth we like to bust on the programme. But the Ambassadors Programme, Bernadette and I spent a long time writing this course, and the aim is not so much to teach language as we have done so far, but more the skills that you gain from learning a language. And we do that by integrating it with actual football coaching. So the children are not being coached now, they are the coach. So what we do is we give them training on what it takes to be a football coach at beginner's level, what they need to plan for an activity, a football activity, what equipment do they need, what could possibly go wrong, how you're going to plan for amending that, what's the age of the players you're going to be coaching, what's their ability like, what do you do if there's some good players, some poor players, some that want to be there, some that don't want to be there. So you're starting to challenge them to be leaders. These are the skills that you can see on the screen that we're trying to instill in the people that come on this ambassadors course. The language is there as well. They have to, adopt a certain amount of language in their sessions, but the idea is the skills that they get from the program. They have to complete a student portfolio with all the activities and reflect on their learning through journals, and then at the end, they have to deliver a session and an assembly to school children to give them reasons why languages are important. So it's a very, very wholesome project that gives you more than just learning language and vocabulary now. It's about skills that are going to be beneficial to them later on. During this program, actually, we show them a video of our former manager, Arsene Wenger, where he talks very, very well about languages. Arsene speaks 6 different languages. I'm going to play this video now, and you can get... we're not going to have sound, are we?
We'll have to summarise what
I'll
he
summarise.
says.
The key message Arsene Wenger says in this video is, he talks about all the different benefits of language learning, which I don't need to, so it'll be trying to teach you new stuff. But the main message he says in this video is that when you learn the language of a country, you never hate that country. And that's a really, really powerful message for children to listen to, because when you think about learning a language at that age, it's all about, yeah, but they might speak English, or I'm not planning to move to Italy or to Germany. But it's not about the communication alone. It's about the understanding and the accepting of other people and getting into their way of thinking. So it's a very powerful video to show, and that factors into our ambassadors program. Lastly, at the end, the students who have taken part in the programme in their schools have the opportunity to come to Emirates Stadium, the home of Arsenal, for what we call a language day. And this is a guided tour around the stadium in English so they can enjoy it and understand everything. But we give them a quiz to complete in the language that they're learning. So it might be stuff I'm telling them, or it might be their own common knowledge from lessons. We give out prizes, we give certificates, but more importantly, we really sell the message about why languages are important. I talk a little bit about my own journey, my own experience, how the players communicate with all the different nationalities, the role of languages at Arsenal behind the scenes, so off the pitch and in the offices now. It's a really powerful visit. Imagine spending a school day in a football stadium being told about languages. It just carries a much stronger message than in the classroom. We, as Arsenal, have a responsibility to connect with these young people because they know they'll listen to us more, in some cases, than they will their own teachers or parents or whatever. So that's the secret behind everything we do at Double Club. And I'm going to finish now by passing back to Bernadette to bring this presentation to the full circle.
So you can see we have a very strong applied approach. But underneath and underpinning this is really the desire to have social cohesion. Football is a great leveller. It's inclusive, everyone can play. It gives everyone the chance to transcend their differences, to shine. It's the beautiful game. One who has nothing can be the best player on the pitch, and the one who has everything can be the worst. It really does illustrate opportunity. It's about improving your performance. It's about empathy. It's understanding other people's languages, and through each other's languages, understanding what it is to be human, cultural difference. And not just difference, but also cultural similarities, the things that really do, if you like, shape the person, transform the person, make them the individual that they are. And if we need any further justification, you only have to look to one of the greatest philosophers, the existentialist philosopher Albert Camus. And I've taken this sourced from the Albert Camus Society. Not everybody knows that Albert Camus really wanted to be a professional footballer at one stage when he was a student, and certainly played in goal very passionately for quite some time when he was a student. And this is really, I think, a very beautiful and fitting message to conclude our particular intervention at this international conference. Simple morality, an ethic of sticking up for your friends, of valuing courage and fair play. After many years during which I saw many things, what I know most surely about morality and the duty of man, I owe to sport. And I learned it in Racing Universitaire Algérios, which was the team for which he played. We have high aspirations for football. I know it isn't perfect, and perhaps we're over-optimistic, but we are beginning to see some real success. Children who are not motivated coming into school. Children who misbehave coming on the coaching course. Coaching primary school children who are younger than them with great skill, with great empathy, with great tolerance, with great warmth. We commend our programme. We hope that was of interest to you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Very interesting indeed. We all know that learning is quite a lot about motivation, but motivation is not enough if you don't have a structure. I think you also have a structure, and this is, well, what is actually needed. We have a few minutes for a few questions. Who wants to? Yes, Eva, please. No, you have to. Okay.
I agree with everything you said, and it's wonderful what you are doing. But still, I'm not completely convinced about football, because the players all behave wonderfully and do fair play, etc. But the fans, they may have a lot of hate, us and the others, and we will burn them and all the... I started working about multilingualism in football more than 10 years ago. It is a wonderful subject, and it's exactly what you tell. But now recently, this year, started working about fan chants, and I'm really, it's a horror part,
Yes,
really,
I agree.
what they are doing. And the fan culture, it goes with football, and it is much less permissive, and there are more problems with it.
Yes.
So what do you do
Shall I take
to
that?
impede these kids from becoming fans?
Yes. I agree entirely, and that's the duality of this, isn't it? Because obviously you have the charitable aspects of football, and not all fans are like that, of course. We've seen it exemplified in Arsenal in particular, as you know, the hostility towards Arsène Wenger, who for us certainly is a figure of extraordinary quality, a man of great integrity in many ways. But we had that divide. In some of our extended materials, we haven't had a chance to really look at the in-depth materials. We do talk to the players who talk about what it is to be a team player. And I think some of that is actually the inspiration, because we can then use their inputs to have class discussions. So listen to what whoever it is says about this. What do you feel? Challenging your own feelings, if you like. So that's why we've moved. We have language, certainly, but that's why we've moved also into these employability skills, life skills, because the transversal skills that you need, because then we can engage in some of this and challenge their stereotypes, their prejudices, through, if you like, the stimulus of an input from one of the players. So I agree with you entirely, and I think, we have got to address that. But in a sense, the power of the game could be the very stimulus which helps us to unlock some of that prejudice which we do need to deal with.
I would also add that from a club point of view, if you think back to football fans in the 70s and the 80s and so on, huge steps have been made forwards in this regard. And that's partly, I feel, because the clubs are now, their businesses, their organisations, not just a football club anymore. There's lots of departments who specialise in this kind of work, and there are departments that reach out to supporters groups, official supporters groups. So it's all becoming a lot more structured, a lot more two-way communication between fans and the clubs. Have we cracked it? No, absolutely not. There's still work to do. But I think we can look back on our progress in the last 20 years, certainly, and see that it is heading in the right direction. But completely agree with what you're saying. I think there'll be nobody in football who would disagree.
By the way, if you work in the community, you may also change the future community in a way.
That's right.
And shape it in a more civilized
Yeah, I mean, rightly or wrongly, when I go into the community or into a school dressed like this, I can walk into a school where they're perfectly behaved and sitting nicely and quietly. I walk in here and suddenly the noise goes up because you've got half of them are Arsenal fans, half of them are not Arsenal fans, and I'm getting all the shouting and so on. But it's all in a sort of a fun school environment. But it's my job there to educate the children about what is respect and what is tolerance and fair play and so on. So unofficially, we in my team, we are the most client-facing, public-facing part of the club. So I personally have a responsibility to contribute to a change in mindset and culture.
Sorry, and we were commended by the local authority of Islington because of the work against knife crime, for example. I mean, London is fraught with this. You'll be reading about this and hearing about this, I'm sure, through social media and the news. So, there are interventions which specifically target these areas. So I do really agree with you, but we're trying from grassroots to really bring the cohesion of society. If we can demonstrate it, we stand a better chance of at least trying to move forward to a more cohesive society.
Okay. Okay.
I have a couple of specific questions. I like very much your work, your project. And I'd like to know who was preparing these materials? Second language teachers together with player, with trainer, or?
Well, we do this, we work on the programme, but we have cultural partners also.
Okay.
So we work with the Institut Français, we work with the Goethe Institute,
Okay.
we work with the Conserjeria, and also colleagues from Italy as well.
Okay. And these materials are only for internal use, are published? I mean, it's possible to have a look?
Yes, of course. Steve will give you little more detail about how to
Okay.
access
Okay,
those.
so because we have the cultural partners, the Institut Français, the Goethe Institute,
Yeah.
the Spanish Embassy and so on,
Yes.
their remit is the UK. So with the beginners booklets, the pupil booklets, for that reason, they're only available in the UK, but the intermediate stuff that's online and free to access, that's you can sign up from wherever you are, because
Perfect.
there's no need to send anything in the post or anything. So
Perfect.
the intermediate resources are free to access outside of the UK,
Could
yes.
be interesting for other people who want
Yes.
to be
Absolutely.
inspired.
And we do have
from-
some Italian material, but it would need, if that were of interest. But we have actually repurposed and modernized, if you like, the three most frequently
Of course.
taught languages in our
Of
country,
course.
which are French, German, and Spanish at
And
the moment. But we
Spanish,
do
yeah.
have Italian resources which may be of interest
Yeah.
to you here.
And the last question, I'm not sure to have it good understood. How it works? You are going in the school who ask for this project, or group of people are coming to your...
People sign up.
Okay.
People sign up.
Yeah, so
Yes.
teachers
Schools sign up.
teachers will order the materials. We send the materials into the schools, and the schools deliver it without us, first of all.
Okay.
But for the schools that are very, very close to Arsenal and in the area that we immediately work in, then I can go and do extras and go into the school, yes.
And then they work alone in the school,
Correct,
at
yeah.
school. Okay, thank you so much.
Hello, thank you very much
Excuse
for
me.
your...
No,
chiedo scusa.
Please ask your question.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and wonderful project. Many thanks. I have just a little question about the possibility to transfer or share this project with other football teams. I mean, not only in UK, but also in Italy. Why not? You think to transfer...
We'll await the invitation.
Before I was managing the program, Bernadette was more involved in this in around 2008, roughly. We had some funding from the English government to expand the program to other football clubs in the UK, and that went very, very well. There were lots of clubs all over the UK running the program in a very similar way, but like with most things, as soon as the funding ran out, that's when the project ended. So that's where Arsenal's a little bit unique, that we don't rely on government funding, we do it ourselves. That's not to say that we would be against it happening again, and certainly on an international basis. So yeah, we'd be interested to talk to you if you felt that was of interest.
I'd just like to thank you for your talk, and my colleague has already asked the question I was about to ask.
So one final question over there, please.
This is really an amazing socially responsible program for the kids and for the community, where basically, technically, we're the Arsenal fans. I'm sure you guys know better than I do that if I had a kid and I were a Chelsea fan, this would have never happened. But what I'm interested in is, thank you. What I'm interested in is there a program within the club to help the new coming players whose English may not be as good as an athlete would need, apart from what we've heard at the introduction today, like the basics, the tactics, the positions, and what you're supposed to do, but whereas to help them basically navigate through life in a foreign country?
Yeah. So first of all, the rule, it's not choice, it's the rule at Arsenal is that English is the language of the dressing room. So if you are not able to contribute to that discussion, then you are given an English teacher. You don't have a choice in the matter. Naturally, for professional reasons, the first things they learn will be the tactical side and the football words and so on. But then the lessons can continue. That's where the choice comes in. The lessons can continue. They even have tests as well, like in school. And you can see the progress of the players based on their own internal motivation. I'll give the example of Per Mertesacker, our German defender who retired recently. He arrived at Arsenal in 2011 with a little bit of English, but not amazing levels, and certainly not amazing confidence. If you go on the internet and find his first ever Arsenal interview, you'll see that he's really, really struggling to speak English, but he never, ever wanted a German interpreter. He forced himself to struggle through with the English, and now you listen to Per Mertesacker talk English, he sounds like a Londoner. Whereas you give the example of other players who perhaps don't take to it so quickly. Some players will still be doing their media commitments in their native language 3 years after they join the club. So it's it depends on the player's own motivation, I suppose, but we do provide the provision for them to learn English. And what I'd also say about the first comment, that's one of my favourite questions to answer, is if it's a Chelsea fan or a Tottenham fan or whatever. Similar to the I am a goalkeeper, I'm a midfielder, I'm a striker, we're not teaching them the position, we're teaching them the I am. With the allegiance to a team and so on, a language teacher should be able to switch that around and say, okay, what do you prefer? What don't I like, I don't like, I prefer, I hate, or so on. So it's a real opportunity to get the Chelsea fan, for example, to engage in the language as well. We're not trying to create Arsenal fans here, we're not trying to sell shirts. It's all about the cause, and if they're a fan of another team, brilliant, they still have the passion, even if it's in a different way. They don't love Arsenal, they might hate us. But we're still channeling that passion into learning the language.
Okay.
Years, he's Serbian, and he did not speak any English before moving to Premier League. And he himself actually hired an English teacher, and once he got into Manchester United, the club actually gave him an English teacher to help him speak English. And now when you talk to him, you know, when he speaks English with a bit of a Serbian accent, but he sounds a lot more like a person from Manchester.
Okay.
Per Mertesacker actually goes into primary schools to help the English teaching in primary schools. He reads stories and helps with the literacy lessons in the primary schools of North London. That's just how well he's progressed.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we move to the second presentation and the second speaker, Raffaele Poli, Data and Reflections on Multiculturalism in Football Teams. So football again. Raffaele Poli heads Football Observatory, which is a leading research group for the analysis of the transfer market and the performance of players, CS Football Observatory, and he also teaches at the University of Neuchâtel. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll try to put it. Raymond, need you. And I take advantage of his presence besides me to thank you and the University of Siena for the kind invitation. I'm not really a linguist, or I'm not really focused on this kind of problematics, I would say, in my daily business, my daily tasks. I created this football observatory in 2005 with a colleague of mine, a French colleague, Loïc Ravenel. We are both geographers by training. I was doing at this time a PhD on the transfer network of African football players, just to know how did they come to Europe, and the networks around their transfer with agents, scouts, etc. And the idea came to create this observatory to have a more statistically based approach on the football players transfer market, and that's we continue to do it within the Centre International d'Études du Sport, which is a private foundation affiliated to the University of Neuchâtel, but with FIFA also as a founding member and main sponsor also of this research center. Today I will cover three aspects, I would say. Basically, then of course we can question it, and the goal is not to give all the answers, of course, but more opening the debate. First of all, I will present some data on the composition of football teams in Europe in terms of diversity, origins represented, and evolution also, which it was said this morning also, it has changed a lot in the last few years towards even more diversity. And then I will present some approaches, possible approaches of looking at this diversity in football teams from a social science perspective. And I will try also to include, to broaden a bit the reflection into grassroots and amateur football, because of course professional football symbolically is very important, but then in the daily life of people is very important. Also, the practice and the grassroots and amateur have potentially have even bigger impact in the end of the day. So first of all, a clear assumption, I think we can agree on this, football is or soccer, as you Americans say, is the global sport par excellence. In terms of diffusion, of course, I'm not speaking only about 11 football, because now in the big cities, and when I travel to big city, I can see even all the time is small-sided football, but still is football. I mean, even though there are other rules, it's not the football we see on TV, but football in these different forms. And the small-sided football now, I think, is the future of football anyway, also in the, considering also the urbanization and the importance of population living in the big cities where space is not enough anymore to play 11 football. I think FIFA did not really understand this so far, and National Association not yet too, but this is another topic. In terms of popularity also, of course, football is very important, because I had access to a recent study on audiences for the World Cup. It was record audiences at worldwide level for last FIFA World Cup in Russia. Estimated half of the world population has seen matches of the World Cup. The awareness of the World Cup is more than 90%. Means that 9 people out of 10 in the world know about the World Cup. It doesn't mean they look matches, they watch matches, but they are aware of football and the FIFA World Cup. And also in terms of appeal, he has the highest scores in terms of appeal of the competition. So I think there is no doubt about the popularity of football, and it were also registered big increases, especially in the emerging markets like India, China. Even there is I think there will be a presentation about that. There is a political will also by the Chinese government, for example, to establish football as a main sport in their own country. And of course, the market is global in football. The market of footballers, athletes. We had Marco Rossi this morning went to New Zealand, which is almost impossible even 10, 20 years ago to imagine that an Italian would go to New Zealand to play football. But it happens, and more and more. In terms of broadcasting, sponsors, you see the big sponsors are global brands associated to football. And as I said also, of course, the core stays in Europe, but now there is an interest for other continents where population is growing, contrary to Europe, to be in football, in the football economy. What about the migration? So this is a map, and the reference is just below. We do monthly reports at the Football Observatory for free, accessible through our website. This was a monthly report last May, I think. It is a map of the main migratory channels at worldwide level. We cover more than 150 leagues, so the most important professional leagues in the world. We can see that really flows of athletes, of football, professional football players concern all the continents. You have the main channel is Brazil and Portugal. Historically, it's very important, the Brazilians, as we say, as we will see after. You have also very interesting phenomena like the Argentinians who are a bit even more present, the Brazilians in other Latin American or South American countries. But you can see also, for example, the Uruguayans go a lot to Argentina. So you have a situation where the Argentinians go to Spain, to Europe, of course, but to Chile, to Mexico a lot. And then the Uruguayans go to Argentina as a stepping stone to perhaps move forward in a second step of their career. So it's not only about migration, it's more about transnationalism and fragmented careers. And this is also a quite new features because, of course, in the migration studies, you have a move, not moving just for the life in the new hosting countries. Now you move between different countries, more and more, until you reach what you want to achieve. In football, it's very competitive. The goal is, of of course, to go to Europe, to the main leagues in Europe, but not many achieve this, but they can still find other steps in their career, and often at international level. Not want to shock you, but of course footballers are also export goods, because there is a lot of financial stakes since the beginning of the career of players. There are transfer indemnities, there are commission fees for agents, payment for parents, etc. You are perhaps following the football leagues, the new set of revelation about the dirty world of football and of football transfers. Football are also export good. Footballers are human beings, of course. They deserve, I think, more respect than actually they have, because, of course, people see them as rich and spoiled people, but in the end, I think if you know them, you change your mind. You understand that they are part of the system, and they are many times victim of a system and not responsible for what happens in football. But yeah, Brazilians, of course, 1,236 expats in these leagues we cover, mainly in Portugal. But the French also, they are world champions now even more, so they are fashionable even more than in the past. 821. On the increase, they surpassed Argentina this year as the second biggest exporting countries, if I may call it like this. Then Argentina, Serbia. Serbians traditionally are really exporters of talents throughout Europe and beyond also. So you see plenty of European countries, because the core of the economics of football is Europe, and 2/3 of foreign players, expatriate players in European football, come from other European countries. Only 1/3 comes from outside of Europe. And it has decreased, because I think the level in Europe is still it has improved even more than the level in other continents. But you find non-European countries, of course, as Brazil, Argentina, but then you have Colombia, Uruguay, Nigeria, the Africans, of course. Football is king there in almost every country, Ghana, Senegal, Ivory Coast. So it's a global market, but there is a division of labor. Some countries are, of course, more specialized than others. Football clubs as melting pot also. These are the statistics of the percentage of expatriate players, not foreign players. We don't look at the passport, we look at where the players grew up. And if they have grown up in a different association from that of the employer club, they have the status of expatriates. They moved abroad for football-related reasons. That's the notion of expatriate players. And you see in 31 top division of UEFA member countries, we had 34.7% of expatriate players in 2009, up to almost every year, actually except 2013-14, where it was stable. All the other time it was in 2010 and 11, but still, the trend is quite clear. 41.5% the 1st of October this year, record figure of expatriate players. Another interesting statistic is the percentage of players who moved abroad already for football-related reasons during their career. Perhaps they went back to play in their home country. It is 56%, so more than the majority of professional football players now in professional football teams throughout Europe have already experienced an international migration during their career. So they have a lot of skills also brought possibly with them thanks to this life experience. And 10% of these migrant players went abroad before the age of 18, one out of 10. The average age of migration is about 21 years old, so very young, but 10% and on the increase go abroad as teenagers, even before the age, as minors, before the age of 18. So you can see also that is a very premature experience, migration in the career of many of these players. Cosmopolitanism in action. You have some leagues like the English Premier League, there is also a political debate around this, about the fact then that there are perhaps too many foreign players, I don't know. That's also part of the discussion, which becomes very political. You have 62.7% in the English Premier League, but it's not the highest figure, it's Cyprus. Cyprus is up to 63.2% of expatriate players in first team squads of the top division league of this country. But you see, even Italy, we have said it before, 56.5%. The majority of players in the Serie A come from abroad today. And it is on the increase. And you can even see Slovakia. You never imagine 42%. It was 20, on average, during the last decade, it was 28. Now suddenly it went up. So they are part, this little country, of this global market more and more. Slovakia is a big increase. Croatia, they were second at the World Cup. Most of Croatian play abroad. All the national team played abroad. But still, you have non-Croatian more and more playing Croatia to replace the Croatian going abroad, and perhaps to do some extra business with players from other origins. Or Bulgaria. Bulgaria had also a big increase. So you see this presence, increasing presence of expatriate players within a very global market. So how can we interpret all of these from a social science perspective? First group of, let's say, thematics, possible thematics, is about the identity. As I said, football, at least professional game, symbolically is very important from an identity perspective. That's why also governments say there is an instrumentalization of football, of course, of sport in general. Football, we have seen at the World Cup, all the governments were there to show them, especially if they do good results. When you approach the finals, you have more and more of these government representatives. What can we say about diversity and identity? First of all, it could be a good sign, I would say, if you see a national team with players from different backgrounds, origins. If you have a certain idea of the nation, it can give you a support to promote a de-ethnicization of the nation. A nation who thinks itself as from diversity. The Brazilian national team was a good example also already for the black population and the black athletes, like Pelé, who was the superstar of the team from poor and black origin. This was a push towards a certain promotion of Brazil as a diverse country and taking into account multiculturalism as an advantage. Of course, this is not taken for granted. We had also the very good example of France, who won the World Cup in 1998, was used as a symbol of multiculturalism again with the France black blanc beurre. And suddenly, 2 years after, with a defeat at the World Cup, it was the symbol of the failure of inclusion. So you can see you can do what you want. It's not natural. There are different possibilities. The same at club level with the term of deterritorialization. In that case, you can see plenty of expatriate players in certain football teams, like Arsenal, for example. Arsenal was on one of the first team we played with 11 different origins at a certain time. You can say, fantastic. You have the world society gathered in a single team, and they play well together. There is no problem of communication. At the same time, you can say, yeah, but what about the local people? They are taking our jobs, even in football. That's also a possibility, of course. So again, you have to fight to direct the reflection as academics into the good direction without instrumentalizing too much also the situation. As I said, cosmopolitanism, you can see, and the free movement also, you can see also the free movement is very good if you think at these young athletes from poor countries being able to achieve their dream to reach the biggest clubs in the world, become rich themselves, help their nation. their family, etc. Fantastic. But at the same time, you can also see the bad aspects of that, all the speculation which is around this migration. So it's, again, you can interpret it in different ways. Second group of issues, I think, very important, which are that we are really close to that at the CIS Football Observatory, the market. What does it mean in terms of what the world is today, looking at this migration of athletes? Of course, since the youngest age, a lot of speculation around them, a lot of pressure to succeed, to perform, to be valuable in the market, because it is a market. Perhaps the players are not aware immediately of what does it imply, but very often they know at their expense what does it mean. So they have also, there is a commodification. They assume a commodity status. I was impressed. I did a lot of research with agents, players themselves, to look at the market more qualitatively, also for the organizing bodies of football, just to understand what does it mean to be a footballer today. And many times they are not aware of what it's really at stake, because nobody want to learn them. Perhaps they prefer not to know also. Sometimes it's self-defense. But they have a commodity status for sure, and they are within a transnational system, and now also the term value chain, which is very raw, but that's what happens. You see now different big financial gaps between leagues and countries, and actors trying to put the players, like if it were a product, to a certain level to make them progress until the moment they are ready to be marketable in the biggest market. Some go faster, some don't achieve, but there is an ideology of value chains with a lot of actors behind that, trying to take advantage of these financial differences and using the movement of the players from a financial perspective. This is for sure at the core of the functioning of professional football. Then, of course, more the topic of this Congress also, all what is about inclusion and multiculturalism, again, is about interpretation. And there are real questions there, like cosmopolitan football teams, do they help to educate about multiculturalism, openness, or on the contrary, do they stimulate racism, xenophobia? We assume that being confronted with the otherness helps you to be, as Wenger said, not to hate people, but to love them. This is an assumption. Is it really like this in football? There was this question about football fans. Does it help really football to overcome division, or perhaps not? That's, for me, still an open question, depending on the context and what do you do with football. Then there is also a set of studies more from a management perspective about what does diversity bring to performance. Does it help performance? Does diversity help, thanks to the complementarity of skills you can bring together, and of course the physical attributes in football, which are not the same, of course, within the same population also, but if you look at the worldwide level, diversity is even more great in terms of physical attributes also. Then you can have a labor division, which ideally the assumption could be, again, yes, the more diversity you have, the more skills you can have, then the better you are. But then there are examples also with cultural clashes, of course, which to me there is no evidence that diversity is good for performance. But it is an open question again. So to conclude, just one question, one big question that really raised in my mind by preparing this presentation. Can diversity in football teams be a driver for social change? At grassroots youth or amateur level, we are speaking about inclusion or exclusion. Does the fact to be confronted with people from other backgrounds Of course, we focus on origin, but it could be social classes, also gender, perhaps. Mixed teams now exist, at least in Switzerland, until the age of 12. There is no girl teams. There are more girls playing football with boys. So does it help diversity to be a driver for social change? Or does it reproduce stereotypes in the end? This is also a possibility. And in professional game also, does it lead to openness or closeness? What does happen in reality? For me, these are open questions. And to really conclude this time, an assessment and a wish. I think football is politically and sociologically plastic. You do what you want with football. You can do a lot of things anyway, that's for sure. And I think the wish should be that we should use it, but with good sense and moderation, because football is a game, so don't instrumentalize it too much. It's about pleasure, playing together against the others also, but together. So with good sense and moderation, to promote positive social values. It's all about education. I was a coach for many years of young football teams. I think that's crucial. You have a good platform to teach, because they are very keen to, not like at school where you can have a resistance. By playing football is their choice. It is a good platform to transmit, I think, positive social values and togetherness in terms of inclusion. But then again, it's up to everybody to do his job. It's not taken for granted. It's not natural. I don't think football promotes good social values or sports naturally. It can promote racism, hate, competition, etc., etc. Is really complex, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there is more to football than just two teams playing against each other and Germany winning, as Gary Lineker famously said. Thank you very much. I think we only have time for one question, because we are running a little bit behind schedule. Is anybody wishing to ask any question? It is indeed a very complex picture, the one you drew. No, apparently there are no. Yes, there is one. The microphone is coming.
Okay, it's back on. Thanks very much for your talk. I was just wondering, as I listened to it, bearing in mind the shortness of footballers' careers, whether that aspect, whether the sell-by date in the interpretation of them or seeing them as goods to be moved and sold, bought and sold, whether the sell-by date is taken into consideration in your data.
Yes, but the problem is that our resources are quite limited, so we cover the main leagues in terms of career path, but when the players go out from these leagues, then we have not the resources to follow them. But I was requested the same question from UEFA recently. UEFA is the governing body of European Football Confederation. And I thought I could give an answer like this. When you look at serial, you have also to have a cohort of players which are comparable. Of course, those national team players have longer careers because they have a better status, so they stay in the game longer. So you have to carefully look at the sample. If you look only at the youth academy players, then you will have a survival rate very low, but if you look at full international, then you can say, yeah, they can play for 12, 15 years, of course, but it depends really from where you start, but for sure, for some players, the majority of players, the professional career is very short, but it's difficult to put a figure on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, and now the final speaker for this session is Cliff Parks. So we move to the other side of the Atlantic. Cliff Parks is, among other things, Vice President of K-12 Programming, Special Projects Counselor for the Long Beach Unified School District, and an expert in urban education and athletic identity issues that most impact inner city youth. So, the floor is yours.
I guess it's, how do you say good evening or good afternoon in Italian? Buongiorno. Just so you guys understand, I am a long way from home. So I just appreciate the opportunity to come here and present to you guys based on just our passion as it relates to our program, the Scholar Baller program. Technically speaking, if we're 9 hours behind, it's probably 5 o'clock in the morning where I'm from. So you can honestly tell that I'm kind of off balance. But I'm here because I work out every morning very early, so I'm kind of like ready to rock and roll. So with that being said, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak to you today. I have a couple of handouts regarding our paper, our topic. Not that I'm going to speak to this paper, but it does give you an example of some of the things that we've studied over the course of the 20-some-odd years of the concept of student-athlete as it relates to academic research. So at your leisure, you can pick these the papers up, and then you can read them at your leisure. But I want to basically give you a clear understanding of what the concept of Scholar Baller is. When you talk about Scholar Baller, you're talking about a concept that my colleague, Dr. C. Keith Harrison, has been studying well over 20-some-odd years, and it's basically the concept of understanding athletic identity. When you look at the 3 tiers or our approach to athletic identity, we looked at the concept of mixing education, hip hop, and sport. So I was talking to Steve earlier, and the first thing I asked him, because we were kind of like comparing notes as it relates to the UK and the States, and I asked him, I said, so when I say the term baller, what does that mean? The first thing he said is somebody that does well in sports, right? And so I said, okay, so the concept really is global, right? So for me as the practitioner of the group, it's one of those things where I'm like, because Dr. Harrison is, like I said, he's a renowned researcher and he's all over the place. He was in Portugal about a month ago speaking, and that's kind of how we got here. And then when I look at myself, I say to myself, athletics and academics has me as a practitioner in Italy speaking. So for me, it's like one of those things where it's like very, very rewarding to be in the position to be a part of the program. Do I have to sit down?
The keyboard doesn't function here.
Okay.
You put it here.
Okay.
So if I did, yes,
Yeah, okay. So what I'm gonna do, say your name again, I'm sorry. Raphael. Raphael's gonna be my clicker. We call him the clicker. So because I want to I'm a stander, so I'm a hands person, that kind of thing. So when I speak, I'm really into like movement, right? So basically what I want to do is kind of go through the slides and just to give you a perspective of what we're talking about when we say the term Scholar Baller and what that means. So you can go ahead and click. So when you look at those two iconic figures, what's the first thing that we would say? We know who those two guys are, correct? Would it be fair to say that? Leo Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, right? So when you look at the concept of Scholar Baller and what that is, if you see those two icons, one of the first things that we thought as an organization is to make a comparison of what we're actually saying when we say Scholar Baller as it relates to the iconic or the identity of a superstar athlete, right? And so Leo Messi and Ronaldo is probably would be our version of Kobe Bryant or LeBron James in the States, okay? And so one of the things that they are, the roles that they play, it's very cultural, I mean, it's global in the sense because of their status, right? So when you look at the concept of Scholar Baller, we're talking about status. Okay, next slide. So basically, Dr. Harrison, over the course of his studies, took the concepts of student athlete. One of the things that he said when he started researching student athlete was student and athlete. The NCAA, the National Collegiate Association for Athletics, they came up with this term in the early 50s, and the term was basically designed to justify how you give scholarships to students that participate or play their respective sport in college. And so when looking at the term student athlete, there was never a connection, quote unquote, to the athlete as it related to the term. It just was a term of endearment that said they were students as well as athletes. So when you looked at it, it was like a dual identity. And so one of the things that Dr. Harrison had studied in relation to it was the concept of the dumb jock theory, basically where they were saying they would always make, I guess, stereotypes about athletes as not being as smart as other students on the collegiate level and that kind of thing. And when in actuality, when you look at the research, student athletes actually perform better on certain tests because of their levels of, or their ability to want to compete, right? So when you look at the concept of student athlete and then you look at the term that we created, scholar baller, what we said or what we did was we wanted to make the term culturally relevant, meaning we wanted the student athletes or the participants in sports to have a connection to the term, because basically what we're saying is when you're a scholar and a baller, ultimately you perform on all phases or in all phases of life. So go ahead and connect. So again, I just kind of spoke about the influence of the label. It talked about academic performance as well as the concepts of the dumb jock theory, and then also the student athlete label. So again, when you look at the concept of student athlete and you merge it together, I mean, student and athlete, it's a dual identity, but at the same time, what we're saying is we want the identity to be a dual identity, but we want it to be culturally relevant, okay? So next slide. So when you look at the various terms, you talk about athlete, student athlete, dumb jock, baller, scholar, baller, and then athletes think, which is a new initiative that we're kind of having come out of our scholar baller program. Next slide. Do you know what? Let me just, can you go back to the, no, we're good. No, actually, it was this one. The one right? No, back. One more. Okay, yeah. So again, I just wanted to make reference to that photo. So when you're looking at, because when I hear these two presentations, the first thing I said was these two presentations, along with what we're saying, is based on what you guys are saying, it's actually a global issue as it relates to how you interpret, how you internalize the use of sport, right? So when you look at this picture and you see an American football player along with a basketball player, along with a lacrosse player, probably a volleyball player, and maybe she plays softball. The concept of student athlete is in the photo. The concept of scholar baller is also in the photo, based on the fact that you're bridging the two gaps of education and sport. We use the term baller because it is a culturally relevant term used in hip-hop culture or pop culture to signify somebody that performs at the highest level in whatever they do. I just wanted to make that clear before we move to the next, that slide. So over the course of my study, being a practitioner of the organization, I'd go across the country and speak. I've been to the University of Michigan. I've been to Kansas State University. I've been to several high schools across the country. I've been to Arizona State. And I would always ask the question, I said, how many of you guys in the room are ballers? And the whole room would raise their hand. And then I'd ask the question, well, why? It says, well, you know, I'm good. I perform at a high level. I'm a person of status. Okay, so, right? Then when I go to the same question, how many of you guys are scholars? maybe 50% of the room would raise their hand. And I said, talk to me about the concept of scholar. Well, I don't necessarily like school, or I'm just here to play football so that I can potentially go to the pros. And every time they say that, I hit them with a couple of statistical facts. I said, less than 0.1% of people participating in sport really get the opportunity to actually make it to the next level. You do know that, right? So then they look at me with this perplexed look, and I'm like, you understand that, right? But then when I ask them, are they a scholar baller? Again, 95 to 100% of the room raised their hand. I said, well, why? He says, well, if it has anything to do with being a baller, then I'm it. So I was like, So as you look at the data, some of the data that Dr. Harrison has comprised over the years, you're like, okay, the term or the relevance of the term actually resonates with this population. Next slide. So then, again, that goes back to kind of what I was saying. What does the term baller mean? Money, good at sports, popular among peers, and fame. Like I said, when I asked Steve, he said it right upon us connecting. He says, "Oh, that means that they understand and they're good, right?" If you ask somebody in the States, are they a baller? They're gonna definitely want to be a baller because of the identity of being successful. With the concepts of social media now and that kind of thing, it's one of those things where you're like, it's relevant to be that person that's looked at as having that kind of status. Okay, next one. And again, it goes back to the concept, what does the term scholar mean? Nerd, someone smart, does good in school, which are all stereotypical terms, but nonetheless means the ability to be scholastic, means that they have access or attributes to wanting to do well in school and that kind of thing. Next slide. So the term baller. So what we've done over the course of the last 6 months, we've gone out and done surveys on just random student athletes and that kind of thing. And when we throw the concept out there, some of the responses come back, and they're, I don't really think the baller label is ever really used in serious context. Most of the time, it's just used jokingly around peers. But my experience with sports, I've never really heard many people use the label seriously unless it was a coach. So when you look at responses like that as an organization, we take all those responses in because we want to make sure that we have enough data to kind of break down and internalize what we're doing, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the student athletes are really connecting with what we're saying. Next slide. And then again, so when you look at the term scholar baller, again, it's one of those culturally relevant concepts where they gravitate to it because it kind of gives them the concept of being cool. Like, school is cool when you say you're a scholar baller, right? Because you are in a position to be looked at as somebody that is aspiring to do the right thing on and off the football field, the basketball court, even in soccer, that kind of thing. One of the things that we do with the scholar baller concept, we label student athletes, okay? So what happens is, when we get the concept, let's say, for example, a university, Arizona State University, right now has been a scholar baller school for the last 13, 14 years. And the one way that you're labeled a scholar baller is that you achieve at the highest level of 3.0 or better, meaning your GPA is comparison to a 3.0, 3.5 or better. And what happens is we brand the student athletes with the scholar baller patch. And basically what the scholar baller patch does is it signifies that you're a person that's doing the best that you can do on and off the football field, basketball court, in your respective sport. Okay, go ahead. So from the scholar baller program, we created a new initiative, basically, and it's called Athletes Think. And so just to give you an example of some of our scholar baller concepts, scholar baller has always been a program as the overarching theme or the umbrella of what we're doing. Basically, it's a salient way of saying that students are in position to do well on and off the football field, like I said. And I always use football as in American football because I'm a former football player, so we utilize the concepts of American football as the caveat because it's the ultimate, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, it's the ultimate team sport because you get an opportunity to rely on 22 people on offense and defense to create a common goal of winning. But there's so many different variables in a football game that signifies everybody has to depend on everybody, which is probably true in every other sport. But because I connect with American football, that's the one thing that that's one of the things we always say, it's the ultimate team sport. But in a sense, athletes have taken a bad rap in the States. Performance, whether it be, when I say performance, I'm talking about off the field performance. If you are in social media, I follow a lot of different elements of social media, and I see negative behavior when it comes from athletes in some instances. So one of the things that we said was, how can we get the opportunity to brand or label student athletes or athletes to think? When I say think, the concept literally means to transition high intelligence into never-ending knowledge. So all athletes globally should think. And when I say think, I'm saying they should think before they do, say, and or act in their community, in their respective sport, in their personal life, in some of the decisions that they make with their money, that kind of thing. Because ultimately, like we were saying, like they've said on the panel, it is a global concept. Athletes and the status of athletes is a global issue. And one of the things that we said was, how do we get the opportunity to brand these student athletes? So one of the initiatives that we're creating under the concept is the idea of athletes think. Because when you look at, like when I was sitting in the audience earlier, I was looking at the panel previous to ours, and one of the things that I said was like, in my mind as I'm sitting back there, I'm like, wow, it is just a good opportunity, or this is a great opportunity for me to see the concepts that we've been studying actually in fruition at this conference, because I'm looking at these 4 or 5 athletes that were here, and I was just thinking about some of their challenges, and I didn't understand what they were saying, but I could only feel what they were saying, and just the energy of it, and then watching them compete on the video that they showed gave me just a warm feeling, because when you look at the concepts of athletes, it is, for me as a former athlete, just to know that we have the impact that we have globally is a major accomplishment. But more than that, it's a major responsibility, because of the fact that the world is actually looking at you. So when we look at the concept of athletes think, we want to push the brand or the global concept that all athletes, wherever you are, should always utilize your ability to think before you do, say, and or act. And the final slide, I think that's the final slide. So in closing, and I know I don't want to be rushed or anything, but I'm just, like I said, in a weird space because of my timing and that kind of thing. When I was listening to these 2 presentations, the one common theme that we talked about, it's a K through 12 issue. So in my daily work as a intervention counselor and a practitioner in the Long Beach Unified School District, it's always a challenge to connect to the future, or connecting with the future with the onset of social media and that kind of thing. But it is still a K-12 issue. When I say K-12, I'm talking about elementary, middle, high school issue, meaning that in order for us to consistently work within the structures of the things that we study, whether it be in sport and just in academics or education in general, we have to somehow create a concept or continue to tap into the elementary, middle school, and high school students, because they are the future, and the transitioning of that group is challenged in the sense, to me, it's challenged in the sense because I'm looking at students having instant access to a lot of negativity. When you were talking about the exploitation of sports, like right now, we have a ranking system in the States, and they rank students as young as 7, 8 years old, projecting where they're gonna end up, right? And so when you look at a ranking for a student athlete or an athlete that's doesn't even really have a clue of or an understanding of the magnitude of sport, when they actually get to the level that they're actually in position to get a scholarship or move to the next level, and they don't. You look at the socialization that's happened to them from the time they were 5, 6, 7 years old, all the way up until the time where they get the opportunity to connect or play on the next level. And the social media has a lot to do with that. So as a practitioner, I'm just hoping and praying that with the work that you're doing in the UK and the work that you're doing and some of the work that we've continued to do, that we'll make a connection to create this synergy. Because again, when I look at myself, coming from the various backgrounds that I come from, education and sport has gotten me in position to be here in Italy speaking. I'm from Southern California, and I'm gonna tell you right now, my background is very adverse, but nonetheless, I utilize my interest in sport. I utilize my interest in academics to channel and utilize some of my barriers as my actual accomplishments. So like I said, in closing, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and share about our program. I know it was a pretty quick presentation, but I did want to open the floor for questions, because I believe that with everything that we've all talked about here today, it's a global issue, but I just appreciate the opportunity to have the chance to speak and share of what we're doing in the States. With that being said, I am Cliff Parks, and thank you again for your kind ears listening.
Thank you very much. Questions? Comments? Even from the panel?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's a very different world in the end. I found it very interesting to see even that this kind of image of student and baller exists, scholar, sorry, and baller exists, because to my knowledge in Europe it doesn't exist. Did you know that?
Right, no. And I think when you look at some of the dynamics, like hip hop culture or pop culture tends to put a spin on that concept or that term, because ultimately what happens is it's a term of endearment for success, the term baller. But then when you look at, even going back to what we were talking about as far as student athlete, like Steve said, and correct me if I'm wrong, students don't get the opportunity to achieve scholarships and that kind of thing?
It's not as common in the UK as it is in the US. I was giving Cliff the example earlier where if we ask the question in the UK, has anybody played football, not soccer, at a high level? It's always the Americans that say, oh yeah, I played for my university. And in the UK, that's like the lowest level of football there is, but it's because you have this scholarship system that
Right.
encourages them to achieve both.
Right.
That's where sometimes the misunderstanding comes in.
No, right.
But certainly, in terms of the term baller, I mean, I recognise it as I mean, it's an expression that's used commonly in the UK as well. But I think the perception, the image that goes with the term, the connotations that goes with baller, I see children that mimic everything that the footballers on the TV will do, even to the point now where if they score a goal or if they achieve something good, they do the serious face celebration. It's no longer cool to smile when you score a goal anymore. And that's all kind of feeds into being a baller.
Right. No, and I totally get it. And I think the misconception, some of the misconceptions or the conceptions are they're skewed, but nonetheless, like I said, with our organization, we're championing the concept of achieving at the highest level. That's the main focus of the term, is to achieve at the highest level.
Yeah, it's a responsibility we share, isn't it, of channeling enthusiasm in the right way to be role models, bring it back round to where, to raise their aspirations and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah, this idea of student athletes and scholarship, etc., this is what NCAA is all about, and it's always been all about.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of what I would call athletics and you would call track and field, probably, which was basically an amateur sport until, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago.
Yes.
And everything happened within the NCAA system.
Yes.
And it was absolutely crucial. And they had to have, in order to stay in the NCAA system, they had also to perform academically,
Yes.
not just athletically.
Yes, and I think that's the other reason for creating the concept of student athlete is to be able to make sure that they are held to the high standard on scholarship. Because again, there used to be a 4-year promissory note basically saying that you have to perform and stay eligible, academically eligible, in order to hold on to your scholarship. But now they've changed that to it's a year-to-year contract where you have to compete and also perform in the classroom. So now it's gone from 4 years to a year-to-year. It's a 4-year commitment, but it's a year-to-year renewal in a sense. I mean, without understanding the total dynamics of it, but it's a year-to-year renewal. So it's definitely tied to performance, academic performance. And then they also are doing the academic performance ratio, where they're grading schools on the number of student athletes that are actually graduating on time within a 4 to 5 year period. So it's, there's a lot of different regulations that are kind of governing everyone involved. And I think the craziest thing is that revenue sport is definitely what it is. It's a business in a sense, because the NCAA makes tons of money off of revenue sports, in particular American football and basketball. It's like $1 billion industry at this point. So when you're talking about it or you're saying that, there is levels of understanding as it relates to how student athletes perform in the classroom as well as on the football field, on the track, and that kind of thing.
One more thing. I'm told, I'm not an expert, but I'm told that there is a growing number of basketball players skipping NCAA altogether and going pro directly from high school.
So what happens
Could you
with that?
comment on that?
What happens with that is that there's, again, we go back to it. There's a matrix right now, basically, where they funnel the top 1%, right? And so it's done through branding. It's done through a lot of the shoe companies and that kind of thing. And so what happens is, again, they go back to it. They start measuring these students, whether it be their growth rates. And when I say growth rates, I'm talking about literally projecting how tall they would be and that kind of thing. But then they start kind of looking at that very early. So you're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, like that. And so what they end up doing is we have this thing called the holdback system, where they're holding students back, like in the 5th grade, like pulling them back a year in elementary school or grade school, so that they can project at the highest level. And so what ends up happening is, once they funnel all the way through and they get to the end, when you're the less than 0.1%, you get the opportunity to be recruited. And so, let's say, for example, Duke University or Kentucky, University of Kentucky, they are kind of like the top 2 schools that are in the field of kind of channeling the one and done. They call it the one and done theory. So basically, they get 1 year to play athletics, and then they leave and go to the pros, because they're projecting. It's almost like saying, if you get the opportunity as a student athlete, and you have an agent or an organization that says, well, we're going to pay you $10 million to come play for us now, and you're going to get a college education. I mean, when you start doing the numbers, again, you're talking about less than 0.1% of all athletes participating that get the opportunity to do that. So it is a phenomenon, but it's still a small number of athletes that are actually getting the opportunity to do that. And then when you start looking at all the other variables, there's only 2 rounds in basketball. So when you talk about 2 rounds, you're talking about 30 players. You're talking about 60 players that get the opportunity to be drafted, and that's international as well. So because now you have international players that they're looking at as well. So when you're looking at a total of 2 rounds, 60 players, you're talking about 60 players, but you're also talking about 10,000 or 20,000 potential seniors coming out their senior year to be in position. So what are we saying with Scholar Ball or athletes think? We're saying, while you're in position, take advantage of both of the concepts, the academics as well as the athletics, because again, athletics and academics has me here speaking in Italy. So it's like basically saying, taking advantage of the opportunity that's presented through education is always the number one thing that we kind of promote with our organization.
Okay, thank you. We still have a few minutes. Louder, please. No, mic is coming.
Thank you. Congratulations on your speech. It was very, very interesting, and it probably does open a whole new door, and it doesn't necessarily fit into this perspective. But I was wondering, the homeschooling in the United States is another big situation, which the kids are homeschooled since they're meant for the parents to become sports ballers, but how the situation is now.
You know what? It's funny you asked that question, and I don't know if you guys have followed LeVar Ball. Have you guys heard of the Ball family? Okay, so there's a family that has played basketball. There's a father that has 3 sons that are really, really good in basketball over in the States. And so what happened with this family is that the dad was real immersed in the growth of his sons. And so one of the sons was a first-round draft pick. He was a one-and-done kid, okay? The middle son was put in position to get a scholarship to UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. Well, he ended up getting in trouble his first year in college. So he ended up taking him out of college and then letting him go play overseas in Lithuania. He also did that with his youngest son, who would be potentially a senior coming into this academic year. He took him out of high school competition, so he kind of forewent all of his amateurism, eligibility, and that kind of thing. So he ended up being homeschooled. Well, here recently, because of the lack of cultural whatever, the kid is now, the youngest son is now back in school. So the Ball family has kind of created a different phenomenon, because he had projections of his sons being all first-round draft picks. One of the sons, which actually is actual player for the Los Angeles Lakers right now, but he kind of, in a sense, did a bad service to his younger son because of the fact that the son missed out on a year and a half of actual parochial education and that kind of thing. So now he's seeing the pitfalls of having done that. But the homeschool concept still exists, but it's one of those things where it's like a catch-22. If you actually take the risk of doing it, then you risk the chances or the opportunities of not being put in position to where you get an opportunity. Again, with Scholar Ball, what we're saying is we want the student athletes to see college as the universal thing in order to connect and be successful. But at the same time, we do understand the dynamics of what happens in a situation like I just explained, because at the end of the day, the kid is now back enrolled in a school in Ohio, and he's gonna play his senior year because he sees now the importance of the school system. He sees now the importance of being able to get recruited and that kind of thing from that path, rather than having gone the route that his father was actually trying to take him to. And parents have a lot to do with it. At this point, parents definitely have a lot to do with it.
Okay, yes, one final question.
And what happens if someone is not a bowler? And I mean, if I reach a good level and not the highest level, what happens to me? I'm no one, or I'm...
Are you participating in sports?
Yeah.
Yes. Then the goal literally is it's a uniformed identity. So our goal, or our ultimate goal, is that everybody balls out in all aspects of life. Okay. So no matter, the highest level is just performance, whether it's educationally or academically. To be labeled a scholar baller, you're performing either or and both. You see what I mean? So as a scholar baller, you don't have to necessarily go to the pros and that kind of thing. You just have to perform at the highest level academically as well as athletically. Or if you're doing academics, then academics, because at the end of the day, we want to brand and label everybody in a positive light.
The real final question over there.
Thank you very much for the speech. I would like to know if there is another league that's not the NCAA, and if yes, what is the difference between them?
Wait, say it again.
Another league that is not the NCAA division.
You said another league?
Yeah, that is not the NCAA, and if yes, is there a difference between those?
Well, you're talking about, so they have semi-pro leagues, or is that what you're saying? Like, so the NCAA is the governing body of all intercollegiate institutions, meaning that when you leave high school, if you stay on your amateurism track, you go directly to the NCAA. You go to a college that gives a scholarship. If you so choose to take another route, let's say you go to we call it the D League or the G League, like that in basketball, then you're compromising potentially your athletic or academic status with the NCAA because you chose to go and get compensated for your abilities to play, that kind of thing. So when you look at it, the NCAA is a sure way to receive an academic scholarship or athletic scholarship and get the chance to fund your education through your ability to play sports, if that answers the question.
Yeah, talking about soccer, is there a league that is not NCAA? I heard talk about the NIA, if I'm not wrong.
Well, I mean, again, for soccer, I mean, it's again, all sports in the States are governed by the NCAA. So again, if you're connected to a school, let's say you're connected to a high school and you get recruited as a soccer player, a football player, and you choose to, if you get a scholarship, then you're vested for 4 years as a scholarship athlete. But again, if you choose to go and play in a different league, I mean, it's one of those things where we call it club soccer, basically. So they have club teams and that kind of thing that could funnel you a different route to get to the MLS and that kind of, or the different Premier Leagues like that. So they have club teams that are connected, that are not necessarily connected to the NCAA, but they do have club teams that you kind of get funneled throughout the course of your time playing soccer. I mean, they have at the highest levels too.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Eva, the real final question.
During the lunch break or now, see that Arsene Wenger video. I guess it's only 3 minutes or something, no?
If there's volume, we can show it.
Okay,
I would like to see it.
We'll find a way to show the video.
It's a minute and a half long.
I was punctual. Eva is to blame. Huh? Okay, fine.
Arsene, in your opinion, what's the value of learning or speaking other languages?
The value first, it opens a lot of possibilities for you individually, because I'm here now managing an English club. If I had not learned English, that would not be possible. So first of all, it opens immense potentialities for you. Secondly, it helps the world to develop in mutual respect, in understanding of each other, in understanding that not only in your country you have the right way to do things, and to open the mind of people is for me certainly the most promising aspect of it as well.
Now, Arsenal's double club language modules, they use football to encourage language learning amongst young people. What role do you think a club like Arsenal can play in encouraging young people to learn languages? Well,
we have a social responsibility and to develop understanding, and you know, you never, if you learn a language, for example, of another country, you never hate this country. And that tells you a lot about stupid wars or stupid fightings, because you have to get in the way of thinking of the other country and the way of understanding other people. And I feel if we just fulfill that responsibility, that social responsibility, we have done very well.
Well, a fitting way to end our session. Thank you very much indeed. Any housekeeping? Yes, please.
Yes. Before this is the lunch break, some communication. So after, we meet at 15:02, so just have 1 hour. And we have the two sessions, parallel sessions in the afternoon. The first one is in this room, and the second one is behind us there, Aula 1, so the room number 1. Sì, le sessioni naturalmente sono in italiano, so, but we have, some presentation in English. And so if you need some information about restaurant, bar, and so on, we can let us know, so that we, anyway, around the university we have many restaurants. And the last one for the social dinner this night, if somebody intend to take part, please let us know. So that's all. So we meet at 15:02. Thank you very much.